The American blues singer Etta James has died of leukemia. She was 73. James was best known for her 1960 hit.
Etta James, one of the greatest singers of her generation, has died.
Etta James was 73 years old, and this morning Bill Whitaker takes a look back at her incredible career.
Known as the Goddess of Blues and the timeless golden voice, with immortal love songs like At Last and Tell Mama, Etta James left an indelible mark on the history of music. But behind the dazzling stage lights lay the bitter truths of exploitation, the torment of addiction, and the final years when Alzheimer's slowly chipped away at her memories. Her life in the end became an unfinished love song, one that never found its final note. Few knew that in her last years, Etta James lived quietly in a Spanish-style villa spanning over 3,200 square feet in Riverside, California. A place now haunted only by cracked walls, frozen hallways, and a secret that no one has ever dared to speak of. Perhaps somewhere within that crumbling house, earth-shattering truths about the life of a legend still linger. In today's video, we'll take you deep inside the untold stories of Etta James and the lingering mysteries that still cloak the abandoned mansion she once called home. In October 1998, as the first winter winds whispered through the aging palms of Riverside, Etta James silently signed the papers to buy the mansion at 4201 Greenbelt Drive. There were no flowers, no applause, no triumphant smile. Only a lone woman, her once golden blonde hair now faded, her hands trembling from years of battling addiction and betrayals that had long drained her spirit. She paid $345,000, a staggering price for someone whose finances were in ruins. But Etta wasn't looking to start over. She needed a place to vanish, a cell of her own making, somewhere dark and silent enough for her voice to finally fade without anyone noticing. The villa bore the fading charm of classic Spanish architecture, flaking stucco walls, sun-bleached red roof tiles under the searing California sun. Sprawling over 350 square feet, it housed 5 lonely bedrooms, a hushed living room, a dust-covered music room, and a locked basement that seemed to sink like a black hole into Etta's soul. Every mahogany step echoed dry and hollow, as if each sound awakened a memory she had tried to bury. In the living room, a lone Steinway piano stood abandoned, its strings slack, its ivory keys yellowed with the stains of too many lost nights. In the freezing basement, hidden beneath layers of dust and rotting curtains, an old safe lay still in a darkened corner. No one ever knew what was inside. No one ever dared to open it, as if the agony of a lifetime had been sealed tight within. By day, the house refused the world, cloaked in a heavy silence. But at night, strange sounds began to stir. They said if you stood quietly at the rusted iron gates, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., you might hear them, the faint strains of a piano drifting from some other world, tangled with strange broken sobs, like the weeping of a soul that could not find rest. An old neighbor named Marlene, who lived at the far end of the street, swore she once saw flashes of light flicker from the abandoned music room and heard a fragment of music rise from the deepest part of the basement. The day Etta moved in, a rare drizzle fell, a soft, persistent mist over the dry autumn of California. In a battered black leather jacket, her hair unkempt, her eyes weighed down by sorrow, she stepped through the chipped doorway like a ghost adrift. The house seemed to swallow her whole, embracing a tired soul who had nowhere left to go. She dragged her heavy steps from room to room, as if wandering through the ruins of her own life. In the largest bedroom, she dropped her suitcase onto the faded carpet, sank down onto the cold, hard floor, and for the first time in years, let her tears fall freely. From that moment, Riverside was no longer just a house. It became a silent witness to every last tremor of Etta James's life. The long, sweat-drenched nights clawing against addiction, the unfinished songs that would never be heard, the broken falls in the living room with shattered glasses around her feet, the soft dying sighs drifting through the darkness of the basement. It was as if every brick, every crack, every torn curtain had drunk in her sorrow and refused to let it go. And from within that house, a new tragedy, deeper, harsher than any she had ever endured, quietly began to take root, creeping through every doorway, every wall, every drying vein inside the fading body of Etta James. To fully understand the tragedy of Etta James's life, we must return to the beginning, back to the days when a little black girl with a God-given voice first began dreaming of stardom, even as the first shadows quietly crept in. On January 25, 1938, in a rundown hospital in Los Angeles, Etta James was born with a piercing cry. Her mother, Dorothy Hawkins, was only 14 years old, far too young to shoulder the role of a mother, too lost herself in a dusty city, gasping through hard times. Her father would forever remain a blurred name in the fog of Etta's memory. From the moment she was swaddled, she was passed from hand to hand, like an unwanted burden among people too busy to love. Etta's childhood passed within suffocating rooms and the unpredictable storms of anger unleashed without warning. She was placed in the care of foster parents, Lula, Mama Lou, and Jessie Sarge, Roger's cold hard people who knew only fists and shouts. By the time she was 5, Etta was forced to sing for Sarge's drunken friends during their late-night benders. If she refused to sing, his rough hands would leave bruises on her tiny body. Every night her fragile voice trembled through the smoke and the sour laughter of whiskey-soaked evenings. And with every note, a piece of her young soul was shattered and ground down a little more. Time moved quietly forward, each layer of hurt settling deeper into the little girl's heart. Beneath the dim yellow lights of St. Paul's Baptist Church, Etta found a sliver of comfort singing in the choir. It was one of the rare times she could lift her voice without fear. But even that fragile hope was ripped away when Sarge dragged her from the church at the age of 10, plunging her into a spiral of endless, hopeless depression. Then came an October night, October 4th, 1945, when the cold rain poured down in sheets. 7-year-old Etta wandered through the streets in panic, thrown out of the house for singing a note wrong. Her small feet carried her along the winding roads of Riverside until she stopped before an old shadowed mansion. Through the fogged window, a faint and murky light still glowed like a whisper. She stood there, soaked in a thin, drenched dress, her little hands turning purple as she hugged herself tight, gazing up at the cold windows. In that moment, the Riverside house, the one that more than half a century later would become a living tomb for her dying dreams, appeared like a distant ghost of the home she had never known. From that first night, the Riverside mansion etched itself bitterly into her memory. And so Etta James's childhood drifted through the dusty streets of Los Angeles. By 19, she was swept into a whirlwind of skipping school, wandering through the night, and lonely, desperate street fights. At just 13 years old, Etta joined the Lucky 20s, a teenage gang that lived off petty theft and pipe dreams of freedom. Her voice, which should have soared through sacred halls, instead rang out in dark alleys, drowning out the blare of sirens and the rush of fleeing footsteps. They said there were nights when you could find the 13-year-old girl singing at an abandoned train station, her voice raspy, but her eyes burning with an untamed hunger for something she couldn't yet name. And it was in the midst of all that brokenness that Etta's talent blazed up like a wildfire. One night in 1954, while skipping school to attend a street party, she was discovered by a musician who heard something raw and unstoppable in her voice. In 1955, just 17 years old, Etta James walked into Chess Records carrying a pure dream and a still fragile heart. In front of her lay a contract covered in fine print, a fountain pen, and a meager advance check for $500. No lawyer, no agent, only empty promises. You're going to be a star. Etta signed, and from that moment, she lost control over her own voice. Shortly after, in April 1955, Etta recorded The Wallflower, the first song she sent out to America. When her young voice floated out over the radio waves, for the first time she clutched the radio to her chest, tears of joy streaming down her face. It felt like her life was about to change. But just weeks later, devastating news struck Georgia Gibbs. A white singer had recorded The Wallflower under a new title, Dance With Me. Henry released widely with the backing of major record labels, Etta's voice was erased. Her music softened and sweetened for white audiences, and the girl who had lit the first flame was shoved into the shadows. On the morning of May 1955, Etta was summoned to Chess Records' office. she sat for hours on a wobbly wooden chair. When the door finally swung open, the manager coldly shoved a thin envelope toward her. Inside was a check for $125, the payment for the song she had poured her heart into. Holding the check, Etta stepped out into the cold Chicago wind. Her heart hollow, as the gusts tangled her hair, she ripped the check to shreds right there in the street, watching the pieces scatter into the sky. That night, Etta drank herself into unconsciousness in a damp rented room the first time she truly understood, no matter how beautiful a black girl's voice could be stolen away in a single effortless snap. Still, she kept standing. Songs like At Last, Tell Mama, and I'd Rather Go Blind would pour from her, each one filling Chess Records' coffers with hundreds of thousands of dollars, while Etta saw only a few meager crumbs. The money was never enough to pull her out of the mounting bills and cold, sleepless nights. Even in 1960, when her album At Last exploded like an earthquake and turned her into an icon for a love-hungry America. Etta James still didn't even own a home. Chess forced her to abandon her fiery blues roots and become the sweet ballad queen they wanted her to be. Each time she entered the recording studio, Etta felt herself dying a little inside the music that wasn't hers. In her memoir, Rage to Survive, she wrote bitterly, "I wasn't me anymore. I was a toy. Sing what they want. Live how they tell you." And so swallowed up by Chicago's dark nights with wages that couldn't even buy her a night's rest. Etta James fell into her first spirals of white powder, chasing a fleeting numbness in a world that had betrayed her voice. Yet even then, it was undeniable. Etta James's name dominated the charts throughout the 1960s. At Last echoed through grand salons. Tell Mama vibrated from battered radios in far-off rural towns, but as the stage lights blazed brighter, so did the wounds inside her deepen. Behind the curtains, loneliness dragged behind her, the shadow of a goddess still searching for a love strong enough to fill the bottomless void left since childhood. Through her youth, Etta James threw herself into love like a moth to flame. She loved recklessly, trusted blindly, only to earn bruises hidden under silk dresses and nights choking back sobs in darkened rooms. At 21, along the rough streets of Watts, Los Angeles, Etta met Billy Foster, a road-hardened drummer who promised a dazzling future. In the early nights of 1959, she believed she had finally found someone to lean on. But 3 months later, Billy vanished, taking with him every dollar she had saved to pay off her debts to Chess Records, leaving Etta with nothing but unpaid bills and a broken heart. Before she could heal, the rainy season of 1961 swept her to New Orleans, where she fell into the arms of John, a slick stage manager she met under the dim bar lights of Bourbon Street one night. In a jealous, drunken rage, John slapped Etta so hard she collapsed onto the grimy motel floor. Blood from her lips soaked into the threadbare carpet, another painful chord struck in the unfinished song of her life. You would think she had learned, but in the summer of 1965, Etta let her heart fall again. This time for an R&B musician, long nights together on tour buses, grand promises whispered into the darkness. And then, cold and sharp as a blade, she discovered he had been cheating on her with her closest friend right behind the stage at a show in Memphis. Once again, Etta James slipped further. The performances grew scarce. Her drug addiction eclipsed the voice that once made America hold its breath. She drifted from one cheap hotel to another, sometimes not even knowing what day it was. It was during this dark chapter that Artis Mills entered her life. He wasn't a star. He didn't make grand promises. He was simply there, pulling her out of blackout nights, carrying her through the antiseptic halls of hospitals, bringing her home after yet another collapse at a dive bar or jail cell. In 1969, after yet another failed rehab stint, Etta James and Artis Mills quietly married at a courthouse. No family, no celebration, just a short contract hastily signed by trembling hands. She wore a borrowed, worn dress, her face gaunt, her hair a tangled mess. In that moment, Etta wasn't dreaming of luxury or fame. She was dreaming of something simple, that someone somehow might finally stay. As the 1970s dawned, Etta James's life sank deeper into the swamp of addiction. The shows dried up. The record deals collapsed. Her career rocked like a decaying ship adrift in stormy seas. Every time she fell, she found herself back inside sterile rehab centers where the stench of antiseptic and failure mixed in the air. Her newspaper photos faded, replaced by short, brutal headlines. Etta James arrested. Again for drug possession. During those years of decline, the relationship between Etta James and Artis Mills slowly rotted away. Artis's quiet sacrifices built on patience and love could not withstand the devastation caused by addiction. The times Artis took her to rehab, the times he took the blame, so Etta could be free. These moments began to carve deep cuts into his own faith. There were nights when Artis would leave disappearing for days at a time, leaving Etta alone in the cold, dark house. Those should have been the places where they leaned on each other to rebuild, but instead they were just silent walls, soaked in the scent of failure. Betrayal started creeping in through Etta's fleeting drunken affairs. Artis was no longer there as he once had been. His returns were filled only with fragmented arguments, choked words of blame, and then silence. No goodbyes. Through the years of wandering between cheap motels in California, through cold rehab centers, Etta James gradually lost the image of the home she had once dreamed of. In the haze of delirium, she mumbled the names of the men who had passed through her life. In the fall of 1998, after 3 failed attempts at rehab, Etta James quietly left Los Angeles. She sold everything she had left, some old jewelry, a few forgotten song royalties, and gathered enough to buy a rundown mansion in Riverside for $345,000, a desolate place far from the stages that had long turned their backs on her. The house was cold and decaying, the tiled floor cracked wide open, the roof tiles rotting under the unrelenting rains. But Etta never renovated. When asked, she simply muttered, "If my life is broken, then my house must be broken too." In the basement, amid old suitcases and scattered papers, there was a small wooden box. Inside it was an unreleased vinyl, the scribbled note, Etta's final love song meant for no one to hear. Next to it, a torn, burned photograph of Etta and her mother, Dorothy Hawkins, part of the photo, singed at the corner like an old wound that would never heal. The only one living with her at the time was her longtime husband, Artis Mills, but their shared life was fractured. Artis had grown weary after years of witnessing Etta relapse, sink into depression, lose herself in illusions, and fall into failure. In the silence of that empty mansion, the two of them existed, like shadow strangers even to themselves. One day, the neighbors discovered that Artis had been gone for 3 days, leaving Etta alone in the dark house. When they found her, Etta was curled up in the basement, clutching the wooden box, repeating like a curse, "Don't take my voice. Don't take it." By the end of 1999, at 61 years old, with her body now aged with time, Etta James struggled in the spacious living room of her Riverside mansion. While searching for a cane to rise after a panic attack from aching joints, she slipped and fell onto the cold mahogany floor. The sound of the impact and her soft groan echoed, but no one could hear except for a neighbor next door. 3 hours later, as the evening shadows stretched, she was utterly exhausted, lying still amid pillows and blankets. The neighbor finally broke down the door, horrified to discover Etta had broken her hip and lost all ability to move. From that fall, her health spiraled downward, her ability to walk becoming a nightmare, forcing her to rely on a walker and old crutches. Pieces of her precious memories began slipping away. In 2006 at Riverside Medical Center, after a series of tests and observations, doctors were forced to utter the harsh words, Alzheimer's. That cruel disease slowly took away her memories, her ability to perform, and the final pride of a blues legend, leaving Etta James with nothing but shattered memories, trapped in the very house that had once sheltered her. Her sons, Donto James and Sameto James, began stepping in to care for her, but disputes broke out between them and Artis Mills. As Etta's condition worsened, the battle over her estate began. Who would control her financial decisions and legacy? Her husband or her sons? In 2008, during her last performance at San Bernardino, Etta James stood on stage as the opening notes of At Last rang out. She fell silent. unable to remember the lyrics of the song that had saved her life. Etta swayed, whispering a few disjointed lines before being helped off stage. The audience fell silent. That was the final legendary moment that disappeared before the eyes of the public. In the years that followed, Etta often confused her Riverside mansion with the chess record studio of her youth. Some mornings, she wandered into the garden wearing her old tattered performance dress, raising her arms as if waiting for a band that would never come. One time, in a delirious state, she took a knife to the glass door, shouting that she needed to record before the sun sets. Neighbors had to call the police, and Etta was rushed to the hospital in a panic, still clutching the burned photo of her mother. And finally, the moment no one wanted arrived. On January 20, 2012, Etta James took her final breath at Riverside Community Hospital after months of hospitalization from complications of leukemia and Alzheimer's. When Etta passed, only Artis Mills and a few close family members stood by her bedside. No orchestra, no spotlight, just the faint, quiet heartbeat that ended in a cold, gray morning. Just days later, as the living room of the Riverside mansion still bore the marks of emotional wounds, the entire family descended into chaos. In early February, attorney Margaret Harris stood solemnly before the will made in August 2008, revealing that all rights to her assets from over $1 million in royalties to the mansion filled with cracks had been given entirely to Artis Mills. This truth was hard for her two sons, Danto and Sameto, to accept. They had witnessed their mother's battle with Alzheimer's, watched her fill rooms with music and hope, but never expected that in her moments of confusion, she would make a decision that would break their hearts. On February 5, 2012, outside the mansion's gates, Danto and Sameto, along with their legal team, blocked Artis's car. Among the no filming signs, they demanded the freezing of all bank accounts under their mother's name, preventing him from executing the will. The palm trees in the yard seemed to sigh as the two brothers passed the broken window, their faces full of anxiety and loss. Photographers with cameras ready, flashbulbs flickering, turned the once quiet grounds into a public battlefield. At the emergency hearing on March 12th, the courtroom erupted. Danto, his eyes red with emotion, presented medical records confirming his mother was not of sound mind when she drafted the will. On the other side, Artis stood stunned, holding a crumpled stack of papers, mumbling that the court should honor Etta's wishes. The gavel echoed sharply, not only ending a hearing, but also carving deeper wounds in the family. Throughout the trial, Etta James seemed to slip through the cracks of justice, her soul once heard, by the world now abandoned among cold legal papers. Their love and legacy collided, and the Riverside mansion stood silent, witnessing the unspoken tragedy of a legend. The Riverside mansion, after Etta James's death, quickly became abandoned, lost to neglect and decay. The once red roof had rotted away, exposing the rafters. The carpet smelled of mildew like a corpse in a long, rainy season. And the shattered windows let in the dry winds. The two sons who once fought for her estate finally withdrew. No one dared step inside, not because they didn't want to own America's treasure, but because the legal and financial burdens were far beyond reach. A lawsuit was pending, property taxes were exorbitant, and the estimated repair costs were hundreds of thousands of dollars, all compounded by rumors of Etta's soul still wandering through the dark hallways, making anyone who heard them shiver. Artis Mills, given full control, sank deeply into debt after borrowing money to fund the trial, unable to keep the house afloat, leaving it in a state of impasse. Danto and Sameto, once heirs, chose to walk away, leaving the mansion as a haunted relic rather than a viable asset where the cracked walls told the ongoing tragedy of the goddess of blues, yet no one dared touch it. In the silent music room, the Steinway piano remained, but its keys were off-key, covered in thick dust as if someone had just played an unfinished song. In the basement, the wooden box containing the unheard vinyl remained intact. When it was finally opened during an inventory of the estate, the record had shattered into two pieces, much like the fractured life of Etta James. The saddest part was that when Etta James passed, she left behind a world that once loved her, then forgot her. what remained wasn't the enormous fortune people imagined a legend might leave. Throughout her turbulent life, Etta left behind less than $1 million. Most of her fortune had been drained by addiction illness and years spent running from herself. Her musical legacy, however, remained powerful. Songs like "At Last I'd Rather Go Blind and Tell" Mama continued to echo through every corner of America, reminding the world of a voice that was raw but sincere, carrying both the sweetness of hope and the pain of abandoned souls who could have known that it wasn't until Etta James passed that her songs truly began to earn money. In 2013, a year after her passing, her royalties unexpectedly skyrocketed by 250%, bringing in more than $3 million. By 2018, streaming revenue held steady at $25,000 per month, and her songs became a perpetual source of life for commercial machines. But behind those songs lay a life more tragic than any of the tunes could ever express. A childhood without a father, a youth submerged in reformatories and drugs, a lifetime of love lost in solitude. The pinnacles of glory were nothing more than fragile launch pads only to fall every time the lights went out. When the Riverside mansion was inventoried after her death, they found one last secret. Inside the wooden box in the basement next to the unheard vinyl, there was a stack of unsent handwritten letters. The ink was smudged with tears written to her biological mother, who had abandoned Etta when she was just a child. In one of the letters, Etta wrote, "You never held me, but every song I sing is for you to hear. If you can hear it even just once, I wouldn't have sung in loneliness all my life." No one knows when these letters were written, perhaps on a rainy night in Riverside when the addiction had temporarily released her for a moment of clarity, or maybe on some morning when her memory flickered briefly amidst the fog of Alzheimer's. Etta James passed, taking with her words never spoken, songs never finished, and broken pieces of memories left behind in that old decaying basement. Her voice in the end wasn't just music, it was the ragged whisper of a lost soul, quietly pleading for love, for remembrance, before vanishing into the darkness forever. Perhaps Etta James's life was like the very love songs she left behind. Imperfect, incomplete, but filled with all that was most sincere. A voice that once shook America, now quietly ended, leaving behind secrets never fully revealed. What do you think of Etta James's journey filled with tragedy yet immense pride? If you could send her a message, what would you say? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we continue to uncover the forgotten stories of legendary Black artists who have shaped history.